For more on the challenges of feeding the world's growing population, I spoke with Johanna Mendelson Forman. She's a distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center right here in Washington and a food security and global development expert.
There are many reasons that have changed over time in the Philippines. One of the things that they have is a monopoly on rice. The government controls the supply of rice. The population of the Philippines has grown. They've had devastating climatic issues. Remember, there was a horrible type monsoon there, which wiped out land. And urbanization has also been a factor in the reduction of the area of rice planting. So all of these lead to higher prices and less rice availability. One of the phenomena in Asia is that many of the countries we see, although they are rice exporters, like to be self-sufficient. And the Philippines is one of the countries that has tried for years to become self-sufficient in rice against a lot of odds, from climate to population, and also because of the lack of land that there is to grow rice on.
And in the Philippines, as Barnaby reports, they're now eating more rice. In some countries, in some places like Japan, they're eating less, but the price of rice there is still going up. Why?
Well, in Japan, there's a very clear reason why the price is going up, and that's because the rice is more valuable to sell as cattle feed. And so human consumption is competing with animals, and it's a very political environment there because a farmer, and there are many rice farmers that do it as a part-time job, get a lot more money for a bushel of rice selling it to a farm cooperative to feed cattle than they do to sell it for humans. So that's the problem. A lot of these countries, including Japan, do not, again, like to import rice. And the challenge in all of the rice market, which is only about 7% of the global commodity market, even though it's the grain that's most consumed around the world, is that the countries don't have a very internationalized market for rice, as opposed to wheat or as opposed to soybean or other types of agrarian commodities that we see. And that makes it a challenge because it's the desire to be self-sufficient.
The FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, it's called on African governments to increase their investments in the domestic rice markets, the rice sector. African governments right now are spending billions of dollars annually importing rice. The FAO says that's unacceptable and just unsustainable. How is that call, that warning, being received?
Well, Nigeria is the largest rice grower in Africa. Nigeria is a huge country, and the problem is Nigeria has to feed itself, and its population is increasing. I think the call of FAO is important because of the regions of the world that are going to experience extreme population growth in the next 30 years. The African continent, especially sub-Saharan Africa, is going to be dependent on more and more externally imported food. So the call to start growing rice now is important, but I think they're going to face certain challenges. One is they're going to face the challenge of increased drought due to climate changes. Second, Africa is one of the parts of the world that's having some of the greatest urbanization. It's very hard to plant rice when you're in an urban area unless new technologies are used to grow rice. Rice is grown in large fields, and it's very water dependent as a crop. It's not hard to grow, but many of the countries in Africa have not yet employed the new types of seeds or the new types of technologies that exist to even grow more high production of rice. There are new seeds and new types of methods. But a lot of African agriculture is subsistence, and the main farmers are women. So this is hard when you can hardly get women to produce enough other types of food for their living to, say, convert to rice. It just is a difficult leap.
So is the solution to food security in the long term, is it greater food independence or food interdependence?
I think it's both. Every country wants to be able to feed its own population if it's a democratic country. We also know that controlling food is a tool that authoritarians use, withholding food, for example. But the thing that is important is we are in an age of globalized markets. The value chain for food doesn't start in one country and end in one country. We get food from across the world, and that's why trade policy is so important. And a lot of countries are frightened by the imposition of new tariffs. A lot of countries are frightened by the kinds of changes in the system that we've been operating under since the Second World War, because food is in fact fungible. You can get food from one place and get it to another, and when you try and control that, it affects global prices. In 2007, there was this tremendous price crisis in rice and other commodities, and that caused riots in Egypt, for example, because many governments with populations that have higher rates of poverty subsidize grain or rice, if the case may be in the Philippines. When you stop those subsidies, which is what trade policies want to do with openness, you create a tremendous hike in the price. So everything is connected to everything else, as we say, and rice is one of those commodities that is.